So you want to make your own film. How do you start? How do you write a story? Where can you find actors? Who do you need for a crew? Or can you do it all yourself? What equipment should you use for camera, sound, and lighting? How do you successfully plan and run a shoot? What are the best ways to create practical or visual effects? How do you edit your film to tell a great story? And most importantly, how do you do all of this without spending much money? If this sounds like you and you have no idea where to start, I've put this free list together as a filmmaker for filmmakers where I reveal my top 10 tips for making your passion project on a budget to get you up and running quickly from whatever level you are at. It's the list I wish had existed when I was first starting out and I knew absolutely nothing. But today I make film and TV content professionally, I've had my short films screened all over the world, and I've been lucky enough to direct some amazing actors. I've also had my work praised by effects legend Dennis Murin, creative director at ILM, who has designed the effects for some of the biggest movies of all time. There's tips on everything from script writing a good idea to pre-production and planning, running your actual shoot, where I share tips from real recent short films that I have directed, and then all the way through to post-production. So if that's got you excited to make your passion project on a budget, then let's get started. Tip number 1 is to remember that restrictions often help creativity. One example you see in everyday life is time. What happens when you have no deadline? You get no work done. What happens with a deadline? Well, you're more likely to do the work. It's the same with any kind of restrictions, and they can actually help your creativity in so many ways. Let's say you're limited by resources. Need an idea for a film? Well, then work backwards from what you have access to, which is also known as resource filmmaking. I've done this several times over the years. If you just have one location, then write something for that. If you have one actor, then that's your character. You can easily reverse engineer a film around something or somewhere that you've found. Limited by money, you can either write an expensive film and then wonder where to find the money and spend years trying to raise funding, or you can write the best cheap film you can and make it right now. Limited by equipment. If you only have a smartphone or one lens or one camera, then come up with something that works with just that. Maybe you can write something that's meant to look like it's been filmed on a phone. If you've just got a GoPro, well, make a short action sequence that you can film with just that. Maybe you've got a fixed lens camcorder. Well, make a found footage film that's meant to look like it's filmed on a camcorder. Your limitations can actually steer you in a good direction. Limited by crew. Okay, well, keep your crew small and it'll cost less. In fact, later on, I'll be showing you a few ways to successfully wear multiple hats yourself, meaning with a bit more planning, you could actually make a film with fewer crew or even totally solo. Limited by length. Well, whether you're planning a short film or a feature, less is always more. You'd always rather watch a film that you wish had been longer than a film that felt way too long. And it's easier to begin making short films and then work your way up to something longer. I actually did this the wrong way round. I started by trying to make low budget features, and because me and my friends could only film after school or on weekends, these sometimes took months or whole years to make, and as a result the quality was a lot lower because I had a lot less time to do the best job I could. And I actually only started making short films later, and then I found I was suddenly able to produce a much higher caliber of work. So it's all about quality, not quantity. Limited by a deadline. If you want to get inspired to make a film quickly, then set yourself a deadline by actually putting a date on the calendar. Remember, a goal without a deadline is just a dream, so give yourself a deadline. Don't wait until a time when you could afford to make anything or plan whatever you want, or you could hire an endless crew. Just start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. So that's tip number 1, restrictions help creativity, and I suggest leaning into your limitations and not fighting against them, and before you know it, you will have made a cheaper and more creative film. Tip number 2 is always start with a solid story structure. This is like building your house on good foundations. Always plan out the beats of your story before you begin writing it, let alone filming it. This way you'll be starting with a clear plan and not just making it up as you go along. If you start filming without this, you'll quickly get stressed and end up spending way too much time and money. Now, features are normally based around a 3-act structure, while short films, which I'm suggesting you try first, normally have a simpler structure. In a normal short film, you will probably have a quick setup, an inciting incident that changes everything, some rising action where the protagonist does things to achieve their goal, a climax when everything comes to a head and gets resolved, and then some kind of resolution. But as long as you have a clear beginning, middle, and end, even if they're only a few seconds or minutes long, then that's your story. Just try and grab your audience in the first few seconds and you'll already be ahead of the competition. Also avoid cliches, things that you've seen a million times before. Your audience will be bored of these same things too. Remember, show don't tell. Don't just write dialogue, write strong images as well, because a picture says 1,000 words. And even if you're doing improv dialogue with your actors, always work out where the scene will start and end. This way you will know where the scene is heading and you won't run out of ideas very quickly. If you're writing a script, you don't necessarily need a fancy script writing program. As long as the story is built on a good structure, you can get it down on paper in any way you like, and it will do the job. The best ideas are very simple. Just try 1 or 2 characters and locations and nothing too impossible to film based on the level that you think you are at. Remember the KISS rule. Keep it simple, stupid. So that's tip number 2. Always start with a solid story structure. Tip number 3 is to cast your roles to match your actors' strengths. They say that 90% of directing is casting, because if you get it right, it does so much of your hard work for you. Now, obviously, when you're first starting out, you probably need to just use who you can. You may already have friends and family who might be willing to act for you, and this is usually where most people start. But the folks you already know might not be able to convincingly play every character you write. Bad acting is very distracting, no matter how much you may like the people that you have cast. So again, use this to your advantage, and instead write something based on your actors' strengths if they are not professionals. Don't get them to play anything that is too much of a stretch for what they are naturally like. It's much easier if you're getting a non-professional to basically play themselves. So if you already know some people who are good at being themselves on camera, a good tip is to just write parts with these specific people already in mind, as this can really help not only visualize the characters as you write them, but it will also make their performances much more natural. And if the people you know are still not particularly great actors even when they're basically being themselves on camera, then you can also try local amateur drama groups, because you can find so many good performers there. These are great places to look because you know these people are already interested in acting, and if you can get them to tone down anything too over the top or theatrical and just get them to do less on camera, you can get some really great results with actors from drama groups. You can of course also try professional film and TV actors, and you could approach someone specific through their agent, or you could look on casting websites. But if you don't have any luck with this route, especially if you're just starting out, then this tip to just write parts for amateur actors you might already know and then play to their strengths can really help. Doing this will make average actors or even non-actors suddenly look like amazing actors, and will again make your cheap film look and feel much more expensive. Tip number 4 is knowing when to crew up or go solo. Now, this will probably come down to the size of the project you are making, as it's basically a trade-off for how many hats you want to wear and how much money you want to save, versus how many other people you want to collaborate with and how much you might need to spend on them. Big films and TV shows usually have crews of hundreds, but a small film might just have a crew of a few people, and the most basic and cheapest method that many people start with is to do as many jobs as you can yourself. On most of my own films, I have usually worked with between about 3 and 6 people, but sometimes I will have to be my own crew, like for my short film Beer and Nuts, as there was nobody else available, so it just depends on the setting. If you want to hear some great methods of making a film almost totally on your own, then I recommend reading Robert Rodriguez's book, Rebel Without a Crew, or watch some of the behind-the-scenes videos on YouTube where he describes the process he used to make his low-budget feature El Mariachi almost single-handedly. I've done solo shoots that, with today's technology, are of course much easier than this, where I've directed, filmed, and also recorded the sound. Now, doing all the technical stuff yourself can be great to keep things cheap, but how do you also concentrate on the actors' performances, which is of course 50% of a director's job? Well, one technique I try when filming solo is to behave like 2 separate people, first as a director and then as a cameraman. I rehearse fully with the actors but without the camera first and get the performance completely right. Then I can pick up the camera and try and capture it as the cameraman. This helps to make it more like there are 2 people actually there, and it allows me to think of both the performance and the technical things. And then of course I can play the takes back and judge them more objectively and see if I want to change anything. But being your own crew can be exhausting and very difficult, and depending on what equipment you are using, you may want at least a few other people to be in your crew. And not everyone wants to try and make a film on their own, because the more hats you wear, the less good you will be at doing any one particular job. And it's not just the filming, it's the organising, it's logistics, it's transport, it's food, costume, props, everything. So there's no better solution than to team up with other people, and if I have the time and the money, I will normally get better results with, as a minimum, at least a separate director of photography / camera operator and a sound recordist. I can put my full attention on the actors and just trust someone else to get good results with the picture and the sound. Obviously, you get even better results with an even larger crew, with people such as a dedicated producer who does all the logistical side, art department, costume, makeup, etc. But these two roles, director of photography and sound recordist, can be a good place to start. Tip number 5 is to learn the basics of cinematography, especially if you are going to be the camera operator. Well, if so, a few basic guidelines will help you out. Firstly, always fill the frame. Now, this means don't include loads of areas of dead space where nothing is happening. If there is an area of dead space, then position something to fill it or reposition the camera to frame it out. A great DP I once worked with said, "Steve, remember ABC, always be composing." And what he meant was always be on the hunt for a better composition of your elements. One thing that can help with composition is to use the rule of thirds, which is an imaginary grid covering the screen in 9 rectangles. Now, it's good to place your point of interest or action on one of the crosses where the grid lines meet, and your composition will look better. So when filming people, their eyes normally go on one of the top 2 crosses, giving them enough lead room or looking room on the side they are facing. For framing lines like horizons, they would normally go along one horizontal line, and verticals like a door frame or a tree would go along one vertical line. Also, remember to use the different planes in your frame. You have a foreground, a midground, and a background to play with. Adding foreground elements to shoot through or blurring the background are 2 good ways to create some depth. A big telltale sign of amateur films is filming characters standing up against walls. It usually looks really boring and gives no separation between your character and your background. If your background is further away, then you can get a nicer blur with your lens, creating more depth to your shots and making them feel more cinematic. Also think about lens choice for your scenes. Now, different lenses can make your audience feel in different ways. A wide lens will feel very different to a tight lens. Wide lenses like a 16mm expand the space around you and show more of a scene. These will distort a person's face if you put them near the camera. Now, this often works well for comedy or a quirky situation, or to help maybe put the audience inside the head of a character. Tighter lenses will flatten out the space and make your subject look like they are closer to whatever is behind them. But for a conventional scene, if you just want close-ups of faces to look more flattering and more normal, then it's better to stick within a range of about 70 to 100mm, and this will remove all that distortion and it will give you a more normal looking shot of a face. If you can only choose one lens to make a whole film on, I would choose nothing that is too wide or too tight. If it was a prime lens, meaning a lens that can't zoom and only has one focal length, I would choose a 50, and if it was a zoom, I would probably pick a 24 to 70. Camera position can also make a big difference to how a shot feels. An easy example is a low shot looking up at someone might make them look powerful, while a high shot looking down might make them look small and insignificant. Then we have the 180-degree rule, which helps to keep your viewer feeling orientated in your scene. To follow this, you should draw an imaginary line between your 2 characters and make sure you always stay on one side of it with your camera. This way, if a character is filmed looking left, it will appear they are looking at another character filmed looking right. But if you step over this line halfway through a scene, it is known as crossing the line, and they won't look like they are facing each other. Now, there is so much more here to cover with cinematography, but these are some of the most basic tips that will really help you out if you are being your own cinematographer. Tip number 6 is to know that good lighting will make any camera look better. Better camera equipment will not automatically make you a better film. Better creativity and skills and knowledge behind whatever equipment you are using will make a better film. A hugely important area for this is lighting. Good lighting adds so much production value and can help make any camera look better. So whatever you're using to shoot your film, whether it's a smartphone or an action camera or a DSLR or mirrorless camera, know that learning how to light your shots properly will make any of these look better. So before you buy an expensive camera, learn how to light things well and save yourself a fortune. Another telltale sign of an amateur film is that in dark scenes you just can't see what's going on and the shots just look flat and dull and really uninteresting, so you can use good lighting to make your cheap film look much more expensive. First, you can start by just using natural light. Outdoors, if it's sunny, then it's better to put the sun behind your actor. This means they won't be squinting, and instead the sun can give them a nice halo around their head. Another tip is to think about the time of day you want to shoot. Now, the best time to make your scenes look better for free is often golden hour. It's that time around sunrise or sunset when everything looks golden with a really nice side light. This always looks better than filming at high noon, which gives that very harsh light straight down, and it can give your actors dark shadows around their eyes. However, if you are using golden hour, that perfect evening light won't last as long as harsh sunlight, so you might have to be quick. If you are indoors and you want to just use natural light, then you can start by trying to just put your actors near windows and see what a difference that makes. You can also start experimenting with a bounce board to reflect some light in different directions. Use a sheet of polystyrene or buy a cheap reflector, and this can make a huge difference to fill in shadows. For artificial light, you can use household lamps to actually get some really good results. If a light is too bright and you want something more subtle, you can try putting tissue paper over it as a diffuser, or for something even softer, bounce a light off a wall or some white paper, and then just adjust the results depending on what you want. Another very cheap lighting solution which they actually use on some big film productions is to use a paper lantern, sometimes called a Chinese lantern or a China ball, with a normal home light bulb inside. This can be carried around on a pole near the camera to brighten the actors' faces, and it can make a huge difference. These are some of the best cheap lighting solutions that I have used, so have a go at lighting your scenes well using whatever you already have before you spend a fortune on camera gear. Tip number 7 is do not neglect sound. Nothing kills a film or gives away an amateur project quicker than bad sound, and you see this all the time. Remember, good picture cannot save bad sound, but good sound can save bad picture. If you watch a beautifully shot film with terrible sound, it will look amateur, but if you watch a badly shot film with great sound, then the picture quality will suddenly look intentional or arty. So unless you're making a silent film or a story that will only be using music, capturing good audio while shooting your film is essential, as it is half the viewing experience. Sound is half the picture. The main mistakes you see in amateur films are either the mic is too far away and so you're struggling to hear the actors, or the mic is too close and so the audio you're getting is really distorted, and both of these obviously sound terrible. So there are several ways that you can fix this. Firstly, for anyone completely new to sound, don't use the internal camera microphone. This is because the action or the dialogue is further away, so that's where you should be recording your sound from, near to where the action is. So if you have a second person and they can help you record sound, then you can use a boom mic, and this is a popular choice. If you don't have a second person, another method is to use a lapel mic, sometimes called a lavalier or lav mic, and it clips onto the actor to keep the mic close to their mouth. And you see this a lot in interviews and on TV, but of course when filming fiction, you have to disguise this mic so that nobody sees it. For wide shots, you might be able to hide it in the actor's clothing, and for close-ups, you might be able to just clip it to their clothing and frame it out. And I've used both of these tricks before. If your actor is not moving far from the camera and is staying fairly still, then you can use a very cheap wired lapel mic, and this has a cable running back to where it is being recorded. Or if the actor is moving around and they're far off, you will probably need to use a wireless mic, also known as a radio mic. This has two parts, a transmitter and a receiver, and the transmitter sends the sound to the receiver, which plugs into the audio recorder or the camera, though radio mics are more expensive than wired mics. Using a separate audio recorder is a good way to run sound independently of whatever you are filming on. This keeps audio totally separate and makes life easier. Audio recorders can also plug in multiple audio sources, so this is usually better than going into small cameras, as you can record different mics onto different channels and use a combination of them, or pick your favorite later. These days you can also use a smartphone as your sound recorder, and you can sometimes even plug in external mics or connect them via Bluetooth. So whatever method you use, don't forget about your sound. And most importantly, monitor your sound with headphones so you know what you're getting, and yet so many amateurs don't do this, so it's not surprising that they get terrible sound. You wouldn't go out and record shots with your camera with your eyes shut, so why would you not listen to your sound? So that's tip number 7. Sound is important, do not forget about it. Tip number 8 is failing to plan is planning to fail. If you have a very low budget and you can't afford to shoot for very long, these planning tips will be vital to make sure you get what you need. Having more time is a good substitute for having more money, and if you spend a bit longer planning and a bit less time filming, you'll be amazed how much you can get done and how much better it turns out. First, always do a location scout before you shoot. This will answer so many questions for you and it will stop you worrying on the day. Think about whether there will be enough room at your locations to film comfortably. Remember, you don't just need space for the actors, you need space for crew and equipment. Will you need power? If so, are there electricity sockets, and will you need to run extension leads to them? Or if not, is there somewhere to charge batteries? Is there a safe place to leave kit? Are there toilets for cast and crew, and a place for actors to get changed into costume? How close are some food options? If you're outside, is there some cover to keep everything dry if it rains? Is there anything particularly noisy nearby that could make sound recording difficult? Also think about production design. Can you dress or alter any of the locations, and are you allowed to? These are all important things to look out for when you scout your location. And to me, the best thing about a location scout is you can take photos or video clips while you are there to help you plan further and begin trying out your shot ideas. This will really get you excited and bring your ideas to life. Speaking of this, planning your shots is another hugely important step. This is the fun process of working out where you want to place your camera to capture each moment of your story in the best way possible. Don't just plan to cover every line, action, or prop from every angle. It's lazy and it's unnecessary. Just decide the best angle from which to tell each part of your story. First, you can draw a floor plan, which is a bird's eye view looking down on where everyone is, and this can help you decide where to put the camera for each moment. And floor plans are particularly useful for making sure you're not crossing the line and sticking to the 180-degree rule. Next, you can begin to make a shot list. Now, this is a good way to tick things off on the day and make sure you don't miss anything. There's no real set rule for what to include, but as a minimum, I normally list each shot I want to get with a quick description and what lens I will be using. Now, you might be more visual and prefer to draw storyboards. These are basically a visual shot list, and I do this when I know I will not have long to get what I need, or if I'm planning a sequence that's tricky and I want to be even more prepared on the day. If you have a crew, storyboards are also brilliant for quickly showing other people what you want to do next. The good thing about storyboarding, even if it's just rough sketches of stick figures, is that it forces you to visualize how you want to tell your story. If you're not sure about how to start planning your shots like this, a good trick is to just shut your eyes and try watching your film, and then turn whatever it is you imagine into a plan by writing a shot list or drawing simple storyboards. When scheduling your chosen shots into an order to shoot, this might sound really obvious, but I would recommend scheduling for out-of-sequence shooting. This means not shooting the script chronologically, but instead shoot in an order that requires the least moving around. Within a single scene, you can shoot everything facing one way, and then you can break for lunch, and then you can film everything facing the other way. This will save much more time than trying to film chronologically and moving the camera back and forth every time. So using any of these methods of planning in advance will save you a lot of time and money. And if you deviate from the plan on the day, that's fine, but at least having the plan will stop you from getting stressed on the day because you will know what you're doing next. And it will also give you that confidence to go off it and improvise once you've got what you need. Tip number 9 is try not to go above 3 takes when shooting. This will save you so much time and money, and it will usually lead to better results from your actors and crew because they will be fresher and less exhausted. I once worked with a director that did 15 takes of a shot, and after a while it was clear that he didn't really know what he wanted. And do you know which take he used in the edit? The first one, because everyone was fresh and less tired and they gave a really good performance. So you should really do everything you can to increase the chances of only needing a few takes. You will ideally have done a quick rehearsal and walkthrough with the cast, especially for any difficult blocking or movements. You or your crew will have checked your camera and audio settings, you will have checked your location to see it still looks good, and to avoid mistakes in your background, I would normally start by filming the wide shots. This is because it forces you to set up the whole location and area first before you start filming close-ups. Doing the wide shots first also allows the actors to warm up without any not so perfect performances being obvious, and then when you do your close-ups, they've normally hit their stride and they've warmed up, so they will give you much better results. If I do go beyond 3 takes, it's usually a complicated shot where quite a few things need to be timed correctly, or maybe there is a technical problem which means we need to do it again, and in cases like this I'll go to more like 4 or 5 takes. But the more takes you do, the more tired your performers and crew will get, and this is why, if possible, I like to get it in 3 and move on. So if you can stick to this method, you will have a nice quick shoot, and you won't have to watch 100 takes to decide which one is best. Tip number 10 is when editing, learn to direct for the second time. A lot of people don't realize that the majority of a film's magic is created after you shoot in the editing room. Even if you have filmed a lot of average material, with a little bit of skill, we can whittle this down to the very best bits, and nobody will ever see all the bits that didn't work. Again, this is a great way to make your cheap film look more expensive by spending time in the editing process. You are basically creating a mosaic of all the best little moments from your shoot, like a greatest hits tape of what your actors gave you. So don't just do it in a weekend, really devote some time to it and make sure you are really including the best stuff. Firstly, just know that unless you are doing something really specific, it doesn't matter what program you use to edit on. For me, when someone says, wow, that was a great film, what did you edit that on? It's like saying, nice meal, what oven did you use to cook it with? The next thing to remember is that editing is not just taking out the bad bits, it is actually building the entire film. And you can completely change the film through your choices. If you gave 10 editors the same footage, you will get 10 different films. So this is normally where the film really comes to life. Always ask what new information is the shot supplying, and if the answer is nothing, then maybe you don't need it and you can take it out. Also, try not to be precious about your own camera work, especially if you filmed yourself. A shot that you really love might be getting in the way of the best version of your scene. Get in late and get out early. We don't need to see lots of unnecessary stuff like people walking through doors. The shorter the better. Keep an eye on the pacing of your edit. Are the gaps between every line too long, or have you done the opposite and taken out so much air that the film struggles to breathe? Getting feedback on your film is very important. Show a rough cut of the film to some trusted people who you think will give an impartial opinion about it, and then, especially if you're editing yourself, return to it with fresh eyes before doing another cut. Eventually, you'll probably get your film as good as it can be, not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing more to take away. I'm actually going to throw in a bonus tip number 11, which is learn to be your own effects person. Again, this tip is on my list because you can use great effects work to make your cheap film look way more expensive, just like Gareth Edwards did in his ultra low budget film Monsters. He directed and shot the film himself, and he also composited all of the visual effects himself on a home PC in his bedroom. And 5 years later, he was directing a Star Wars film. He directed Rogue One. So there is hope for us all. Learn about effects shots if you really want to up your production value as a low budget filmmaker. So effects shots usually involve filming or obtaining the various parts of your shot separately and then compositing them together in different layers in a seamless way so that nobody can spot the joins. To begin with, I always start by asking this question: what can be filmed for real? And then I work backwards from there. The more you can film for real, the better and more convincing your shot will be, even if you have to break it down into lots of small parts. Then once you've done that, you can overlay and combine these real elements together to create what look like impossible shots. So if you're making an effects shot, I suggest you always start with that question: what can be filmed for real? I do often also add digital finishing touches as well, but I always try and film as many elements for real first and not the other way round. As an example of this, let's look at my car jump effects shot. For this scene, I wanted to find a method of making it look like the camera had filmed me jumping out of a moving car and landing by the road, all in one take. Now, I couldn't obviously do this for real, it would be incredibly expensive and dangerous, so how do we fake it? What can you do for real? The first half in the car has to be real. We need to see that I'm in the car and I'm opening the door to escape. The second half out of the car has to be real. We need to see me land by the side of the road as the car drives off. Think of it like a magic trick. We need to prove the start is real and the end is real, and then we need to film some sneaky extra elements to connect them. So what else can we try and film for real? Well, here's what I did. I thought we need to actually see the figure jumping, so we can do that while the car is parked. I thought we might need the door opening as a separate element too, so we did that while the car was parked. And we need a moving background to put behind this to make it look like the car is moving fast when I jumped. And we did that one driving down the road with the camera mounted on a pole held out of the window. So right there, we've worked out a list of basic elements, and I eventually linked those real shots together by cutting them out and overlaying them on top of each other. But those shots there are what I decided I needed to film. Once I've worked out everything like this, I will always make a shot list for me to use on the day so that I don't miss anything. I've also found that trial and error is key for low budget effects shots. Sometimes I just don't know what will work until I've sat down and done a quick overlay on the computer before I decide I can finish filming. And if it's something complicated, I'll just do lots of shots until I think I have one that is likely to work. Again, having more time can be a good substitute for having more money. So that's my process for planning and filming the effects shots, and I pretty much use this method whether I'm doing live action interaction with actors, using miniatures or digital elements. It all comes down to asking what can be real, breaking up the shot into different parts, and then trial and error while trying to film them. So this method should work well for you if you want to do what I do and be your own effects person. So there you go, those are my top 10 tips for making your passion project on a budget. But knowing them simply isn't enough. You have to get out and actually practice these to learn them, because practice makes perfect. My theory is it's all about working backwards from what you already have and reverse engineering the best film you can make. And before you know it, you'll be doing things that you never thought possible. So thank you for stopping by. Happy movie making.